Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Erin Errol, Marketing Manager for Phonesuite, and I'm thrilled to welcome you back to our ConnectWare Deep Dive series. And we know your time is valuable, so these monthly sessions are designed to provide the technical knowledge you need to take full advantage of the value of the ConnectWare platform and move the hospitality industry forward. So today we're diving into a critical component of hotel management, guest survey features. We'll show you how to move past the basic call logs and start transforming every guest interaction into the kind of actionable data that actually moves the needle on satisfaction. So to lead this deep dive, I'm joined by our experts, the session host, Erin Bailey, our product manager, and Erin is going to expand on configuration logic, survey triggers, and how to pull this data into your analytics. Co-hosting is Kevin Solkowitz, VP of UCAS. Kevin is here in a supporting role today and will be monitoring the chat and Q&A to make sure your technical questions are answered in real time. We are also joined by Eric Meneses, VP of Business Development, and Jeff Sutherland, Channel Success Manager, to provide any sales-related strategy we may need during the Q&A discussion. A few quick housekeeping items. We're recording this technical session and we'll send the link out after it's been processed so that you can retain it for reference or share it with others on your team. So also please use the Q&A button at the top right of the screen throughout the demo to submit any questions that may arise, and we will answer them in real time if applicable, and also reserve questions for a dedicated Q&A at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Erin. Erin, show us how we're redefining guest feedback.
Very good. Thank you very much. So we're going to dive in today on the guest survey. First thing you'll want to understand is that the ConnectWare system has a survey feature. This may not be something that everyone is aware of, but we added this feature into the system to try and collect those surveys at the hotel level when you have some ability to manage that relationship and maybe to correct any issues that exist. And before that survey gets out to the wider world, either in Google or Expedia or things like that. So the problem that we went to solve is just that by the time the surveys were coming in, it was already way too late to do anything about it. You get the information on Google a week after the guest left saying, hey, we had a really bad experience in the room, or there was this horrendous noise down the hallway because the ice machine was broken. And that's really something that you want to fix then and there, not a week later, because you've already had other guests maybe experience that and more bad reviews inbound. So this feature is really designed to help hotels manage their guest relationship and that survey data, again, well before it gets out to Google or Expedia, things like that. And so we, being the phone system provider, realized, hey, we have a great way to connect with the guest via a phone call. We can call them to do wake-up calls. We can call them to do a drop-in message, but let's go ahead and expand that and let's call them and do a survey. And so that's what we did and that's what we built. The goal here is obviously to allow the hotel to see that information in real time or as very near real time, maybe just a minute or two lag, and be able to manage that guest relationship and hopefully really increase the number of 5-star reviews that the hotel is going to get on the social medias, Google, Expedia, things like that. So that's the overall goal with the solution. So this, while sounding very simple at the high level, required us to do a lot of thinking about how to actually implement it in a way that makes sense, is logical, is consistent, and is not going to, in and of itself, reduce the guest experience. So the first thing that you'll need to know is that the survey feature is not automatically turned on, of course. You can enable that in your domain, and we'll look at later how to do that. So by default, surveys are off. When you turn them on, the way the system works is that when a guest checks in, we will then call that guest 10 minutes after they check in to do the short survey. And there are default questions that we'll see here in just a moment that exist in the system that you can use or modify. However, that 10 minutes after check-in might not always work. If you check in at 2 p.m., great. 10 minutes afterwards is fine. But if you check in at 3 in the morning, you may not want that call 10 minutes afterwards. So I'll show you here in the system, we actually really worked hard to design the logic and the process so that you're not getting those calls at 3 in the morning or at weird times, that you respect sort of evening hours and no, times when you don't want to have that call come in. So there's some complexity here, but again, we really wanted to make sure that the survey itself was not the generator of a negative experience. What we're going to do here is I'm going to pop into a live system and I'm going to show you a little bit about what the survey looks like, how to set it up, and how to edit questions and all of the different options that we have available. The survey page, when you enable surveys, is going to be in your hospitality console. So you're just going to have under offline guest phones, you're going to have survey. And your dashboard is going to be your main page where you want to go to view the survey results. If you are a normal front desk individual, you're going to have access to view the survey, but not a lot else. You have a search bar at the top to do a date range search, and you can look at different versions of the survey, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But that's about it. If you're a hotel manager, i.e. the GM, then you get some additional actions to actually edit the survey. And we wanted to make this more user focused or user front so that the hotel can adjust the survey as needed without necessarily contacting our resellers all the time to make those adjustments. So we see here that we have a check-in process, a hotel lobby, and then a guest room. And you'll notice that we have the general 100% satisfaction for the first two. And that's because none of the results we got were under a 3. But if we get any 3s, 2s, or 1s, that's going to reduce from your guest room quality in this case, or whatever question it is. So we consider a 4 or 5 to be good, and a 3 or below that is something that you need to take a look at or act on. And that is a hard-coded thing that's built into the system. The survey questions are always 1 to 5, so you can't adjust that. Again, we had to make a trade-off between usability and complexity. Next, if you are the hotel manager, and let's say you want to add some new questions or you want to adjust things, you go up here to settings. Excuse me. Yep. And then we have our survey questions. So the survey questions tab, as you might imagine, is where you can list all of the prompts that are spoken to the caller. And for brevity, we tried to make this short, so there are text limits in here so that you don't ramble on. You want to try and keep those short and concise to not waste your guest's time. And you can, of course, brand these. So it just says by default, thank you for staying with us. There is every possibility in the world that you want that to say, thank you for staying at the Holiday Inn Express, Denver North, or the Marriott by, so-and-so at this location, whatever you want. So you want to brand that after you enable it, because as soon as you enable this feature, the default questions are loaded and surveys will begin 10 minutes after the next guest checks in. So you want to make sure that you don't enable it until you're ready to go in here and set up the questions to be whatever you want, or if you're okay with the defaults, that's great as well. You also have the option to play the sound. So once you type it out, you want to play it to make sure it does sound correct. And same text-to-speech rules apply. You might need to add extra commas or spaces or periods, things like that, just to get it to sound correct. And don't worry about spelling. Phonetic spelling is what you want to make sure it says the words the way you want them said. So do make sure you adjust that a little bit. Then you have your 3 questions that are defaulted, and you can add more questions. You can add up to 5, or you can reduce the survey down to as few as 1 question. So again, we give you a lot of flexibility there, but we try and give you some rational defaults as a good jumping off point. And then there's a closing message, which you can edit or omit. You can make this just say, thank you. We hope you enjoy your stay, whatever that your hotel is going to want. When you adjust these questions, one thing that we did, and this again goes into the idea that this is a simple sounding feature that has some very complex applications. And that is the idea that once you change the question, like let's say you don't want to ask about the hotel lobby, you have something new in the parking lot you'd like to ask about, or you want to ask them if they've heard about the spa that you just opened or whatever. Once you adjust that and you save it, you don't want the current ranking to be applied to your new question. Because if you've already had a couple of guests talk about the hotel lobby and you change that question to be about the spa, it's not logical to apply those previous answers to the new question. And that's where the versioning comes in. And that's what you saw up here. You have the version 1 of the survey. And so one thing you want to be aware of is if the survey has been running for a while and you change it, it's going to look like all of your responses got deleted. And don't panic, they didn't. It just loaded the new version of the survey and you don't have any responses for the new version. But you can always go back to the previous version and look at all the data there. You also have your question marks here, which will give you the exact text of the question. So if you do change the hotel lobby question, and then you want to go back to a previous version and say, okay, what I know it's about the hotel lobby, but what was the exact text? You do have that in memory here, so you can view that. Again, goes back to the simple sounding, but a little bit complex. Speaking of a little bit complex, hopefully not too complex, this is our schedule for delivery of the messages. So you have your blue zone here. So if you check in between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., you're going to get, or 7:59, you're going to get the call starting at 8 a.m. that same day. You just checked in very early, but we're going to go ahead and try you that same day. If you check in between 8 and 7 p.m., we're going to try you 10 minutes after you check in. If you check in after 7:01 p.m., but up to 5:59, then the call happens the next day at 5:30. The logic there is if you check in quite late, let's say midnight, we don't know exactly when you're going to want to wake up. It may be 9 or 10 a.m. because you had a very late night. And then you may get up and go and do whatever you need to do. And then you're not going to be back in the room until later on that evening. And so our logic there was, let's go ahead and ring them later on. And that way we hopefully increase the number of survey responses that we get. And lastly, well, you do have a custom schedule here, which will adjust the green bar. I recommend not messing with that unless you really have to. I would really encourage you to just present this as the time that the system uses, because again, if you don't really think through it, you can do some unusual things and might have unpredictable results. So I would encourage you to just use the defaults. And then you have alerts. So if you want to have the hotel staff alerted, let's say the GM wants to know if somebody scores something very low, you can set up alerts. So now you don't have to go in here and check every hour or every day and see what's going on. You can get an email notification, you can get a call, or you can get an in-app chat message, not an SMS, but an in-app message that will let them know, hey, we just had a low ranking from room 102. The guest name is Bob Smith, and here's what they ranked low. And that again goes back to the core idea of this entire feature, is to allow you to make meaningful actions while the guest is still there to improve their satisfaction and hopefully get better scores on Google, Expedia, things like that. So you've got a lot of options here, and hopefully this feature is designed well enough so that you can adjust it and use it and apply it to just about any hotel that might want to use this feature. Right. So if we go back to the slides here, we're going to run through just a couple more things. So as I mentioned before, you have the dashboard, which is viewable by anyone who has login access to the hospitality console. but you have your GM or your office manager, whoever you set with that permission in the users page, will be the only one with access to change the questions and edit things. Because as I'm sure you can agree, you don't want your front desk staff going into the survey thing and editing questions. Probably not what they need to be doing. You also have the at a glance, so you can see exactly what the survey results were. And if anything was below that 3, then you get that marked as unsatisfactory, and it'll give you a percentage off of the total number of surveys you got and the ones that were above a 3 or below a 3. You have the option to tailor your questions. So this is fully customizable. You can go from 1 question to 5. You can make the intro message say whatever you want, the outro message, the thank you at the end, say whatever you want. You could even put in something there that says, we really appreciate you taking the time to take this survey. Come down to the bar and let them know you completed the survey with the discount code something, and just make up a word. And that way you sort of encourage those guests to complete the survey and see it through to the end. And you might mention that at the front of the survey. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of incentivize your guest to go through that survey and complete it. Again, also full customization of the questions, what they ask, the names of the questions, and the alert threshold. So by default, it's 3 or below, but you might want to edit it so that if they scored a 4 below, that it's considered bad. Or perhaps a 2 or a 1 or below is considered alert worthy. So again, lots of customization there. Coming soon is going to be the option for a mid-stay and an end-of-stay survey. So by default right now, we give 1 survey. It's after you check in or the day after you check in, depending on the time you showed up. And it's that 1 survey and you're 1 done. But some hotels have asked for a mid-stay and an end-of-stay survey to make sure that if they maybe scored something low at the beginning of their stay and you've corrected it, that you can see that reflected in your survey results. Now, there's one big caveat with this feature that I need to let you know of. Well, 2 really. Number 1, it's not released yet. So today it's not available, but it will be coming soon. Number 2, we need a property management system that tells us when the guest is checking out. Because otherwise we have no idea how long that guest is going to stay and when the mid-stay and end-of-stay surveys need to trigger. And we're not going to guess on that. So if we don't have a PMS that's going to tell us that the guest is going to check out in 3 days or 4 days or 10, then the mid and departure stay surveys just won't work. And so that is one big caveat. Unfortunately, we do need the PMS's cooperation on this, and not all PMSs support that type of data. I can tell you right now that the Oracle PMS does, and is the main customer that we had in focus for this end of stay and mid-stay survey results. But please do be aware of that. And I would encourage you to check before you offer this as a feature to your customer so that you don't have to walk that back later.
And Oracle API connection.
About what is supported, you can always reach out to us at support@phonesuite.com. But I will tell you, if you're using the older legacy, like Mitel interfaces or the serial interfaces, those are almost certainly not going to be, they're not going to send that data. It's going to have to be the newer API interfaces, but even with those, it's not all of them. So just something to be aware of. Lastly, I'm sure at this point you're like, man, I want to set this up now. I've got lots of customers who could use this. This is an amazing feature. How do I actually get this enabled? Well, luckily, that's the next thing we're going to cover, and it's really easy. So what we do is we go into our domain here, and then we go up here to edit domain, and we take the complicated step of going down here to survey and switching it to enabled, and then clicking save. So we tried to make this very, very easy to set up, and that's how you do it. Again, it is turned off by default. Obviously, we didn't want to just start this feature and have hotel's guests start being called without the hotel being aware of it or agreeing to it. So obviously it's turned off by default, but you can turn that on for any domain that you would like to. Beyond that, once you do enable it, again, you're going to get those default questions. So just be aware, you should probably check in a guest and make sure it's going to ring the room phone. We've tested this, we know it works, but you may also want to allow your hotelier, your GM or whatnot to actually listen to that from a guest room phone. Doing it that way may help them see something or want to adjust the language a little bit or whatnot to really make it exactly the way they want it, whether that's with branding or maybe shortening up a question or changing the way it's said, whatever. And that is the end for our survey. So again, this feature was added a little while ago, but we realized that it was hidden away in the domains, and maybe you don't read all our release notes, which, I'll forgive you. And you just didn't know this feature existed. So we wanted to take this time out to show you how it works, that it exists, and how to get the most out of it. Because again, the bottom line here is we want to increase the guest satisfaction. We want to allow that hotel a feature that's really going to make an impact on their bottom line. And surveys are absolutely one of the things that hotels look at and want to keep high. And so far as we're aware, no other system is doing anything like this. So this is a great sales point into your hotels to talk about, hey, this is not just a phone system that has hospitality built on. This is something that they really thought about and understand the DNA of a hotel and what is actually important. And they built this feature so that you can utilize it and get that actionable results and make those actions to really try and increase that satisfaction for your guest. And with that, we'll move on to any questions that were
Thanks,
submitted.
Aaron. That was a fantastic look at how we can turn standard guest interactions into high-value operational data. And it's clear these automated feedback loops are a game changer for maintaining high guest satisfaction scores. We've had a very active chat throughout the demo, and I see our co-host Kevin has been busy flagging some of these more technical entries for you. To dive deeper into those under the hood questions, I'd like to officially bring Kevin Selkowitz onto the floor to lead the Q&A session. Kevin, what are the partners asking about today?
Yeah, I got a few things come up so far. So what happens to a survey that gets abandoned partway through?
That's a great question. So they pick it up, they answer the first question, and then get busy. Their kid starts jumping on the bed or whatever, and they hang up. That the survey will save for as far as they went through the survey. And that may be something you need to explain to your hotel's GM, saying, hey, you might get some weird results where you may have 20 responses for the first question and then 18 for the second and 12 for the next. That means that people ended the survey early. And that in and of itself is some good insight. You may want to adjust those questions or give them a heads up on how many questions they're going to ask at the beginning to try and increase that completion percent.
Or ask fewer questions.
Right. Ask fewer questions, tighten it up so it's shorter. Or again, say, hey, if you complete the end of the survey, we'll give you a special code that'll give you a 10% discount off your next meal at the restaurant or something.
Right.
That's economics 101. People respond to incentives. So if you give them an incentive, you will increase your survey results.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel the whole kids jumping on the bed. Like, I can't talk right now. Yeah. For those who have implemented this, has there been any friction with guest annoyance, too many surveys, getting bothered? Like, what have we heard about this from the hotels?
Yeah, so far, so good. We've not heard any negative feedback, and I think that's due to the customization of it. If you do start to receive that negative feedback, obviously you want to adjust your surveys or maybe even turn them off, because the last thing we want is for this feature to actually drive negative sentiment. That's the exact opposite of what we want to try and accomplish here. So this underscores, I think, the importance of really talking to your GM as you're setting this up, really going through how it's going to work and having them test it so that they're comfortable with it, and then being very sensitive to that initial feedback in the first couple of days and weeks, and being very generous with adjustments that you make to tune that in.
Okay. So let's say, the guest isn't in the room. It gets triggered, post check-in. They already went to the pool. What happens?
Yeah, so in that case, the survey is a one-off thing. It's going to call them 10 minutes after they check in, and if they don't answer, that's it. We figured it was better not to annoy the guest with multiple follow-up calls and things like that than it would be to just do the one and done. So perhaps if you get a lot of feedback saying that hotels would prefer some sort of retries, let us know. That's not something that we've designed currently, but it probably wouldn't be impossible to implement.
Okay. And obviously right now it's triggered on events. Is there a way to trigger it from Oracle API, or is it only on the events that we discussed?
Yeah, currently it's only available on check-in. There is not been discussion yet to trigger that from another event or some sort of button in the hospitality console. But again, if that's feedback you're getting from your hotels or requests, let us know, and we're always open to trying to adjust things.
Yeah. Yeah, it would actually be kind of interesting. I was thinking that I hadn't thought of that before, but if you go to the spa, you could trigger a spa, queer, survey.
Sure.
So yeah, maybe there are other opportunities there. Let's see. Let's very briefly just checking. Okay, so there's a question: is there a way to stop surveys for a specific room? Well, and right now, obviously, there only is the one survey. I'm going to answer this question.
Sure.
So yeah, but yeah, I guess it's an interesting question. Is if we have a mid-stay and an end-of-stay survey, is there an opt-out option?
Or no survey? That's a good question. And currently, no. So I understand the logic where if that guest checks in and is maybe just in a bad mood, or is someone you don't want to survey, whatever else, to just hit a little button and say skip this guy. I guess the best thing you could do is check them in and then talk to them for 9 minutes before they get to the room, and then they'll miss their call. But if that becomes a request that we get from multiple hotels, we can look at doing that. So absolutely, we are absolutely wanting your guys' feedback on this as you implement it, as you set it up, and as you talk about it, try and sell it. Let us know what works and what doesn't. We love that feedback.
Yeah, because I could definitely see there might be the particular customer that really just doesn't want to be bothered at all.
Sure.
So that is a good suggestion. Okay, so we get a negative survey. Obviously, you showed the alerts. What else, what else can happen? How do they deal with this situation?
Sure. So beyond the alerts, it's going to be up to the hotel to look at those survey results and then make meaningful actions in their hotel to and try and increase those. Obviously, we can't make recommendations or whatnot, not knowing the situation of every hotel. So it was our job to try and collect that information as seamlessly and easily for the guests as possible and deliver it to the hotel in as many methods as they desire. Again, you have the chat, you have the call, or you have an email. I would recommend the email because then you can catalog those and archive them and look back and make sure that things are in fact moving in the right direction. But it is ultimately up to the hotel to respond to them. If they do surveys and never look at the results, that's unfortunate on their part. But we did try to make it available. Yeah, good question so far.
Actually, we didn't show the guest survey ratings.
So this is your sort of summary of the guests. So we have Rachel Summers here, score 3 out of 3. And so you can see the results for individual guests and see what happened there. So if you do need to drill into that, you can. And yeah, Kevin, thanks for calling that out. I did skip that. So
yeah. So yeah, so the intent here, just so everybody knows, was to kind of be able to view and manage follow-ups and notes and track our remediation of these issues. Yeah, staffing. So this is it's an interesting question of does this create more work? Does this create less work? How do we deal with more data? Sometimes makes people think that there's going to be more work to assess.
Sure.
So, like, what does this mean for their workload?
Yeah, another good question. And the reality is this does add a little bit to the workload. There is some emails that didn't exist before. There is a new screen that didn't exist before. There might be a workflow where every night the night auditor is responsible for going in here and writing down the results for the previous day or previous week. So there's no two ways about it. This does increase the workload a little bit. But hopefully that additional work is justified by your higher ratings that you're going to get on Google and TripAdvisor and things like that. Obviously, we tried to make it so that there's not a lot of additional work. We tried to make a very friendly dashboard and alerts via email, things like that, so you don't have to go in here and look it up every day if you don't want. At least in terms of those bad surveys, you want to make sure that you get alerted on those so you can take action right away. But yeah, again, the reality is there is a little bit of work, but hopefully the trade-off is much higher guest satisfaction and better survey results on publicly facing websites.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose, if most of the hoteliers will respond on the public sites, so you have to respond one way or the other. So
yes,
probably better in private.
Especially those bad ones. Yeah, you want to respond to those always. But if suddenly you start receiving only good ones on Google and Expedia, then I think that the work you have to do, even if it's, it would floor me if it was more than an hour a day. That seems ridiculous. But an hour a week spent on this is a high return on your value, your time spent.
Okay. So survey-wise, is it getting any repeat bookings? Have we seen, success and feedback on that? Like, is it what's the value to the hotelier? Do we know?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's a lot of variables that go into that. The initial results that they were getting, the actions that they took, and then the responses they got from their guests are all going to be different by site. So I don't have any hard data that says this feature increases guest satisfaction by 5 or 10%, or will move you from a 4.5 stars to a 4.8 stars, anything like that. Just because everything is so different, and there's going to be so many variables that's going to make that almost impossible to correct.
Yeah.
But we do aim to have it to be easy and something that you're paying attention to. There's the old understanding that if you don't measure it, you're never going to act on it or try to improve it. So even the fact of measuring this and making it visible may help your hotel staff improve things in ways that you can't articulate. If the lobby is always getting a low score, your staff might realize, oh, okay, I know what to do to improve this lobby. And now that I know that it's being seen and we're getting reports on it, now it motivates me to actually care for it and keep it improved or do whatever needs to be done to get that score up.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of nice feedback to know what people are thinking about things, because they may not
right, they may not have even crossed their mind.
Right.
And it's a good idea to maybe initially, when you're doing this feature, to spend a week asking every guest that comes in questions that you wouldn't ever think to ask. How was the parking lot? How was the pool? How was the lobby? Were there problems with elevators? Because worst case scenario, you spend a week asking those questions, everyone scores it green 100%, and you're good. Okay, great. Check that off. We don't need to really worry about that again. It's exactly what I thought. But if you ask about the elevator and all of a sudden everyone's scoring it a 2 or a 3 when you thought it was fine, that would be some really good insight to go, what is wrong with this elevator? And you might then start to look at it with new eyes and say, oh, the lights are out or they're flickering, or there's this weird, horrible scraping sound as it goes from the second to third floor and it sounds terrifying. It's stuff like that that your staff may ignore because they've heard it 100 times, but may really alarm your guests.
Yes. We've definitely stayed in some hotels, obviously, that the flickering lights, nobody loves that one.
No. Flickering, scary elevator, who knows?
Yeah. So this is obviously a pretty high-tech feature. We have hoteliers that are very high-tech. We have hoteliers that aren't high-tech, which is kind of leads to the next topic or next month's topic. But what about the hotelier that just doesn't want to log into a web portal every day?
Well, that's where the value added of your value added reseller comes from. You can help them and enable them to add this feature and get it set up the way they want without them having to do it themselves. So you may need to take half an hour or 45 minutes with them to really set this up. But that's one of the things that as a reseller you can do for your customer and really show them that there's a reason that they're paying for your services. In addition, going back to those alerts, that's going to be your best way to say, hey, you don't want to deal with this, you don't want to log in and look at it, fine. What we'll do is we'll set it up so that anytime you get a 4 or below, you're going to get an email about it. And then that way, if everyone's scoring things 5s across the board, great. You don't have to log in, nothing happens. And then your workload is really 0 until there is a problem. And that's why we built those alerts in there so that you can get that information when there is a problem. Because, we get it. GMs are busy. They've got 300 dashboards they need to log into every day. This maybe doesn't need to be the 301st. So if you've got that GM, just note that we've got that covered, and you can set up the email alerts or call alerts if you want, or in-app text alerts.
Looks like that hits all the Q&A stuff that we've gotten.
Perfect.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Kevin and Aaron, and thanks to everyone for those great questions. We're nearing the end of the webinar, so we're going to wrap things up shortly to respect your schedule. If we didn't get to your specific question, don't worry, we've captured the log and we'll follow up with you directly. And as a reminder, you'll receive an email with the full replay of today's session for reference. This series continues next month, and we'll be discussing the front desk hospitality console, showing you how to get the most out of the ConnectWare platform. Kevin, I'll hand it over to you to briefly expand on this.
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited about this. So next week or next month, when we talk about the hospitality console, we're not talking about the web portal. We're talking about essentially replacing the old school hotel console, those giant Mitel things that cost thousands of dollars, and getting that functionality on a desk phone for that hotelier that doesn't want to deal with the web portal, to be able to do things like wipe a mailbox or move a guest room, all from the desk phone. So again, I think probably the first in the industry to do that with a standard desk phone. And I think it's a great feature set for small hotels that want to do things the way they always did it.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And to our guests, if you have any further questions about guest surveys, or if you need help navigating this feature, please reach out to Jeff Sutherland at jsutherland@phonesuite.com. And once again, Aaron and Kevin, thank you for the deep dive. And to our partners, thank you for everything you do for Phonesuite. We will see you next time.